Hello, and welcome to CJ Creates. I'm CJ, and I create stuff. Hello again, everybody. How are you doing? I'm doing well, thanks for asking. Today is kind of a special episode because I get to draw for one of my favorite YouTube channels. I'll go into more detail in just a moment, but get ready because we are going to be talking about some very cute bugs today. Let's get into it. For those of you who don't know, Subjectively is a really big YouTube channel that does art. Their main artists, Jack and Claire, are really good, and I've looked up to them for a while now. I'll put a link in the description to their channel, but I'm going to assume that if you like Pokemon and if you like art, you have probably already heard of them. Anyways, they have a whole Fakemon region called the Mazah Region that is being made into a game. The best news is that they're taking fan submissions. These are open till around the end of October and can be submitted through their Discord if anyone's interested. I believe the plan is to take around 10 or 12 Pokemon designs total for fan submissions, and they're taking anything and everything, so regional forms, mega evolutions, and completely new Pokemon are all on the table. I thought it would be fun to make 2 submissions, and what you're seeing here today is the first one. The Mazah region, the fake region for the fan game, is based mostly on Central America with some South American inspirations as well. This is super cool and I love how out of the box it is. Another important note is that Subjectively specifically asked for a couple types of Pokemon, and I knew I could deliver when they said they needed a bug Pokemon. You guys may or may not have figured this out, but I'm actually a pretty big paleontology, zoology, biology guy. I have massive stores of information on more life forms than you probably think could exist. It hasn't been particularly useful though, at least until now. Let me introduce you guys to a cute little critter that you've never heard of before, the velvet worm. These guys are native to many places in the world, but some of the most interesting species live in Central and South America. A couple of fun facts about velvet worms: they aren't actually worms, and they aren't related to bugs in the way you would think. They may look like very cute, squishy little caterpillars, but these guys actually evolved as one of the earliest land-dwelling invertebrates still common in our era. They're older than just about any common bug you see today, even arachnids, for instance. Another fun thing, the name is accurate. Not to say that velvet worms are made with 100% real velvet, but they sure do feel like it. The covering on their back is very soft and supposedly feels exactly like crushed velvet. It's pretty fascinating. The last fun fact about the velvet worm is what makes it such a fitting Pokemon. Velvet worms have 2 very specialized organs on their cheeks that make them incredible predators. These syringe-like structures can expand and shoot a sticky liquid a very far distance. That distance is at maximum about 1 foot, which may not seem like much until you realize that the smallest velvet worms are only 10 millimeters long. Larger species do hit up to 20 centimeters, but that still makes them able to shoot 1.3 times their body length. This sticky liquid also hardens quickly once exposed to air, trapping a velvet worm's prey instantly. This bug's already a real-life Pokemon, it just needed someone to draw it. These kinds of abilities allow it to eat prey 2 to 3 times its size, which is impressive for anything that small. While this ability is something that makes it a perfect candidate for becoming a Pokemon, I wanted it to have some level of, I don't know how you'd say it, magic to it, I guess. I mean, a sticky liquid that hardens instantly is very cool, and it could make nets of it, but there's already plenty of Weaver Pokemon with strong, net-like substances, so that didn't seem quite right. For me, I thought maybe it liked to weave cloth and clothing, and we'll kind of get more into those details with its evolution, but just have that in mind. This little Pokemon could use its abilities to trap and ensnare its foes, but instead it uses them to make beautiful things. Meet Whirlvit, the velvet worm Pokemon. We're going to get more into its lore in a minute, like I said, but for now, look at how cute it is. This little velvet worm stays small, just like its real-life counterpart. Standing only 3 inches tall, they would theoretically be the smallest Pokemon ever, but I think that's fitting. Its squishy body does make it quite vulnerable to just about anything, so it uses its small size to help it stay hidden. Generally distrusting of humans, when a Whirlvit does find someone it likes or trusts, it becomes incredibly loyal. It has the same organs as a real-life velvet worm, meaning it can shoot a sticky liquid over a great distance. This liquid is mostly used for self-defense and makes capturing a Whirlvit quite difficult. In making Whirlvit's evolution, I thought it would be awesome to make it a bug fairy type. Subjectively said fairy types would also be considered, so why not shoot for both? A quick side note about fairy types though, in my quest to be a huge nerd, I learned Japanese. I also lived in Japan for a few years and talked to a lot of people about the game. I learned something interesting. While it's called fairy type all around the world, in Japan, fairy doesn't quite mean the same thing. In English, a fairy is usually some kind of small pixie with wings and magic. I think Tinkerbell is a good example of an English fairy. In Japanese, though, this isn't the case. Fairy means something that can do magic, which is similar but doesn't carry the feminine or winged connotations that English does. So a fairy type is just a magic type. Maybe that's not a revelation to some, but I think it's important to keep in mind when designing a fairy type Pokemon. They aren't fairies, but rather magical beings. So, how to make velvet worms into magical beings? Well, I had an interesting idea. What if it had two kinds of liquids it could spray from its cheeks? What if one of those liquids would turn into a fine velvet that it could spin into clothing, and the other was a gross, sticky one that could snare and entrap? The lore just kind of flowed after that thought came into my mind. This Pokemon would have anciently been seen as something of a kingmaker. Though it possesses a general distrust of humans, if it does find someone that it deems worthy, it will spin them fine clothes using its velvet. Those individuals would become champions of society and potential candidates for king or emperor. This wasn't a blessing that would be easy to receive though, as this Pokemon could just as easily curse you with a sticky liquid that would harden and become difficult to remove. Anyone seen covered in it would be scorned and looked down upon. It may seem a little harsh for this Pokemon to be both judge and jury, but I imagine it would only make itself known and act if it witnessed something either truly terrible or truly great. It doesn't just spray everyone who it's ever found, rather it watches, hidden, for humans that meet its standards. These people would be friendly toward Pokemon and have performed great tasks of heroism. This, though, only applies in an ancient setting. Now this Pokemon is hunted for commercialization of its velvet. They're still great at hiding, but businesses will seek them out, knowing that their precious velvet can sell at high prices. This ties the Pokemon into the main themes of the Mazah region, tradition versus modernity. Traditionally, these Pokemon were revered and sacred, but now they're being hunted for their velvet, highlighting the potential costs of foregoing tradition. You may have noticed that in drawing Whirlwitt, I actually went back and removed its arms. That's something I did after drawing its evolution, and I did it for a couple of reasons. The first is that I wanted there to be a greater difference between the two. They're similar in color and shape, and only basic changes were being made. By giving only the evolved form arms, it gave it a better and more distinct silhouette, something I think is really important. The second reason was to help sell its fairy typing. Whirlwitt is just a regular bug, so it probably shouldn't have arms or anything magical going on. It can keep its squishy disposition, but I only wanted its evolution to be a fairy type. The arms help sell it as something magical because these bugs don't normally have this sort of appendage. Meet Warloom, the Kingmaker Pokemon. We already did a deep dive on its lore, but I think it's worth restating that Warloom seeks out worthy individuals. In a modern society where they're hunted for their velvet, I imagine that instead of giving out clothes as they did in the past, instead they choose their trainers when they see them as worthy. Anyone who possesses a Warloom should be regarded as its champion and a leader in society. I do understand that technically all Pokemon undergo a similar decision, but I imagine that when Warloom does it, it's incredibly picky and it makes the choice more impactful. It may gift its trainer with clothing from time to time, but it would never pick someone who's going to ask for its velvet. Warloom hits this note for me somewhere between Goodra and Gastrodon. It is squishy and cute, and it just feels like a friendly Pokemon when I look at it. I also like the idea of keeping it less than a foot tall so that it can ride around on the shoulder of its trainer, proudly claiming them as its champion. Maybe I went a little crazy with the lore here, but I'm doing my best to make a subjectively Pokemon. They're always so well designed, and their lore always ties them back into the region. If I'm going to compete, I want Whirlwitt and Warloom to feel like they already belong. Well, here they are, my first two submissions for the Mazah region. What do you think? They're fresh designs that I've never drawn before, and I'm really excited with how they turned out. Sometime soon, I'll show off my other submissions, a regional Tangela, but you may have to wait a minute to see that one. Let me know how you feel about these two in the meantime. Do you think they live up to the high bar that the Mazah region sets? For now, I hope you like what I've made, and I can't wait to see you create something of your own.